At Christmas, my dad barked at me and my 7-year-old daughter and said we were both grounded. Then he ordered us to eat alone in an empty room. Mom added that we needed to learn our place in this family. I told him thanks, but we had already eaten. 2 hours later, I made one phone call, and my parents turned frantic. But it started at the dining table. My parents' house in Pittsburgh looked like a magazine spread. Candles, the good china, a glazed ham Mom guarded like it had won a prize. Poppy sat beside me with her feet swinging under the chair, her hair still damp from the snow. Everyone was talking over everyone the way they always did. Then Poppy leaned forward and asked, clear as a bell, when do I get the thing Great-Grandma said she left so we would always be safe? Dad's fork stopped in midair. Celeste's smile froze. Mom gave a strange little laugh that came out one note too high. Dad blinked hard, like Poppy had insulted him, then snapped that it was a rude question. Poppy's eyes widened. Celeste had jumped in too fast and turned to her daughter with a bright voice, telling Maisie to show Grandpa her award. Maisie lifted her little plaque like a crown, and the whole table shifted into applause as if Poppy had never spoken. Someone chuckled at her. Not with her. Her face went red, and her shoulders pulled inward. I watched the room decide she was the problem in one breath. The silence was not empty. It was strategic. Poppy did what she had already learned to do. She opened her mouth and said she was sorry. Dad leaned back like he had won something. I put my hand over hers on the table and told her to stop. I said she did not need to apologize for asking a question. Mom's eyes narrowed at once. She warned me in that sharp voice that always meant fall in line. Dad tilted his head and said that in this house, children show respect. Poppy looked between us, confused, and tried again, saying she did not mean anything bad. I told her I knew. Then Dad pointed his fork at her and said she had embarrassed the family. He told her to stand up and apologize to everyone at the table. I took one slow breath and said no. I said no. She had asked a question. Dad's face went flat in that dangerous way that meant trouble was coming. Then he stood up and planted both hands on the back of his chair. He looked down at Poppy like she was a stranger he had decided not to like. He told her to stand up and apologize right then. I kept my voice level and told him he was not disciplining my child for speaking. That was not his lane. Mom let out a short laugh and repeated the word lane like she thought it was cute. Then she reminded me that I was a guest in their house. I told her Poppy was my daughter. Dad's jaw shifted once. Then he said fine, loud enough that the cousins at the far end stopped chewing. He pointed toward the hallway and announced that we were both grounded. He said we could go eat alone in the den. It was not even really a den. Just an empty room with a card table, like punishment had its own floor plan. Mom added almost calmly that we needed to learn our place in this family. Poppy's hand tightened around mine. I felt her start to fold into herself, the way children do when they are getting ready to become agreeable, just to make it stop. I squeezed back and said we were not doing this. Dad said we would do what he said. He was not asking. He was claiming ownership. That was the moment I understood he was not punishing Poppy. He was testing whether I would hand him that power. I pushed my chair back and stood, still holding her hand. The whole room waited for me to argue, or plead, or try to smooth it over. Instead, I looked at Mom and Dad and said thanks, but we had already eaten. Mom's mouth dropped open, like no one had ever spoken to her in a full sentence before. I turned us toward the front hall, past the stacked presents and the glittered stockings. Poppy stayed close beside me, moving carefully like the floor itself might tilt. Dad barked after us to come back. I did not. I helped Poppy into her coat. My own scarf went on without shaking. Celeste followed us to the doorway and hissed that I was being dramatic. I looked at her and said I was being specific. Outside, the cold slapped my face awake. Snow crunched under our boots. Behind us, the front door opened again, and Mom called after me in that sweet poison tone she uses when she wants to sound reasonable. She said I was making a mistake. I buckled Poppy into the car seat and shut the door without answering. The drive home only took 15 minutes, but it felt like an entire season. Poppy stared out the window at the lights on other people's porches, blinking slowly like she was trying not to cry. At a red light, she asked in a whisper if she had done a bad thing. I kept my eyes on the road and answered the way I would answer a homework question. No, you asked a normal question. She picked at the edge of her sleeve and said, Grandpa told her she was rude. I told her Grandpa wanted her quiet, and that was different. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, bright against the dashboard. I did not touch it until we pulled into our driveway. The first message was from Dad. He said we were grounded and needed to come back to apologize. The second came from Mom, saying I needed to learn my place. Poppy watched my face and asked, completely serious, if we were really grounded. I looked at her in the mirror and told her adults, do not get grounded by other adults. Then I got out, unbuckled her, and felt her lean into me for half a second before she caught herself and stood straight again. That hurt more than anything from the dinner table. At home, the quiet felt different. Our couch, our mismatched mugs. The hallway light Poppy insists stays on. I made cocoa and sat with her on the rug while she lined up her new crayons in a perfect row. She kept glancing up at me like she was waiting to hear what she had done wrong. I brushed her hair back and told her she did not owe anyone an apology for asking about being safe. She swallowed and said she always says sorry. That landed hard. Small, but sharp. I told her we were going to practice not doing that. She nodded like I just assigned homework. When I tucked her into bed, she hugged her rabbit so tightly the seams stretched. Half asleep. She whispered sorry again. I leaned down and told her not tonight. After she drifted off, I stood in her doorway and watched her breathe until the rhythm steadied me. Then I went into the kitchen and stared at the clock. This exact thing, a child punished for a question, was what great-grandma had warned me about without ever raising her voice. It was not about manners. It was about control. I opened the family group chat because that was where Mom liked to perform reality. There were already photos from dinner. Maisie in her sparkly dress. Dad's arm around her shoulders. Mom, captioning it with pride. Poppy was gone from every image after the question. I scrolled back through the group chat and saw the pattern the way you suddenly notice a stain that has always been there. Maisie praised for breathing. Poppy corrected for existing. There was even a voice note from Celeste. I played it and heard her laugh lightly before saying Dad handled it. Dad handled it was how they described humiliation, like it was tidying up after dinner. I did not answer. I just sat there and let the old memories rise. A backyard barbecue in July, when Poppy slipped in the sprinkler and knocked over a cup of lemonade. She froze and said sorry before anyone had spoken. Mom sighed and asked if I could get my child under control. Across the yard, Maisie had just soaked Dad with a water balloon, and everyone laughed like it was adorable. When Poppy spilled lemonade, Dad called her clumsy. When Maisie splashed him, he called her spirited. Back then, I told Poppy to apologize because it was quicker than fighting. Tonight, it felt like I had been training my daughter to disappear. The golden child had grown up. The scapegoat had just gotten smaller. And I was done handing my child the same script. The first time great-grandma brought it up, she did not make it dramatic. We were alone in my parents' kitchen after a doctor appointment, while everyone else watched football. She turned on the faucet low, like she wanted the sound to cover us, and said Poppy asks questions like I do. I smiled because it sounded like praise. Then she looked straight at me and said that if they ever punished Poppy for asking, I was not supposed to argue. I would not win a shouting match in that house, she said. I would only teach my daughter that love comes with silence. Then she reached into her apron pocket and handed me a small folded card with a name and phone number on it. Gavin. She told me he was her trustee and her executive. If they ever did what she thought they might do, I was supposed to call him. No warning. No negotiation. She pressed the card into my hand and said she had promised Poppy we would always be safe. "Safety does not work," she said, "if other people get to control it." Sitting in my kitchen that night, I could still feel that card in my palm. After what happened at dinner, the next step no longer felt confusing. It felt obvious. I sat at the kitchen table with the house dark around me and replayed Poppy's exact words. The thing great-grandma left so we would always be safe. She did not say money. She did not say inheritance. She said safe, because that was how great-grandma explained it to her. Not like a prize. Like protection. I could suddenly hear that old conversation clearly. Great-grandma had once bent down to Poppy's level and told her she was leaving a safety net, so she would never have to stay somewhere that did not feel good. Poppy had nodded in that solemn little way children do when they understand more than adults think. That was why dinner turned ugly so fast. My father did not hear a child being curious. He heard a lock rattle. He heard a door opening towards something he wanted closed. I picked up my phone and read his messages again. "You are grounded. Come back. Apologize." The words landed differently now. They were not about manners. They were about obedience. He still thought he could assign consequences to my life and expect me to accept them. I opened my notes app and typed one line. Punished beneficiary for asking about safety. It sounded cold, but it steadied me. Then my mind jumped back to the funeral. That day, I moved like someone underwater while my mother cried loudly in public, and then started directing people where to park and what to bring. My father took over the paperwork the way he always took over everything, by getting there first. In the church hallway, I watched him lean over a clipboard with the funeral home director and sign forms with that confident flourish he uses when he wants everyone to assume he belongs in charge. When I stepped closer, he angled his body between me and the page without even thinking. He told me he had it covered. Later, when a banker-looking man dropped off a thick envelope at the house, my father slid it into a leather folder before I could read the label. He tucked it under his arm, walked straight to his office, and locked the door. I remember standing there with a paper plate in my hand, thinking it was odd. Sitting in my own kitchen on Christmas night, I finally had a better word for it. It was deliberate. A few weeks after the funeral, I tried to ask the right way. I brought it up carefully while Mom poured coffee and Dad sorted mail, like this was all normal, and no one had ever hidden a folder from me. I asked if I could get copies of great-grandma's estate documents for my records. Dad did not even look up before saying no. Mom asked why I would need that, and Celeste, seated at the counter like she still lived there, gave me one of those patient smiles meant to make me feel silly for wanting basic information. She said Dad was handling it. I reminded them that I was great-grandma's granddaughter, and Poppy was her great-granddaughter. That was enough to make Dad finally raise his eyes. They were flat. He said there was nothing for me to worry about. Mom told me to stop digging and learn my place. That phrase had been living in that house longer than I had. I remember swallowing my questions because I knew exactly how the evening would go if I pushed. Mom would cry. Dad would lecture. Celeste would sit there looking reasonable while I was turned into the problem. So I let it go, or I told myself I did. Christmas proved otherwise. Around 8:15 that night, after Poppy was asleep, my phone lit up again. Dad had left a voicemail. His voice was slow and sharp. He said I would bring Poppy back the next morning for a family meeting at 10. He said I would apologize to him and Mom, and Poppy would apologize to everyone. Then he added that if I did not, we were not welcome in this family. Mom followed with a text pretending to be gentle. We love Poppy. Do not make this hard. My stomach did not drop this time. It just went still. They were not asking to talk. They were issuing terms. And the wildest part was that they still thought it worked. Like I was 17 again in my childhood bedroom. I took screenshots. I labeled a folder in my phone Christmas. Then I started a second folder and labeled it funeral. I did not feel dramatic. I felt organized. I went to the hall closet, found the plastic bin of great-grandma's things, and dug until I found the laminated recipe card with Gavin's name and number written neatly on the back. Before I called Gavin, I called Celeste. Not because I thought she would help, because I wanted to hear how she would spin it. She answered on the second ring with a bright hello, like we were two sisters having an ordinary holiday check-in. I asked her why she did that at dinner. No small talk. No laid in. She sighed and told me I always made everything about me. I said Poppy asked a question and Dad grounded her. Celeste corrected me immediately. Dad did not ground her, she said. He corrected her. There's a difference. I said he told a 7-year-old to eat alone in an empty room. Celeste lowered her voice like she was offering wisdom and said Poppy could not just bring up stuff. I asked what stuff. There was a pause. Half a second too long. Then she said I knew what Grandma set up and that Dad was handling it, so I needed to stop causing problems. That little slip was all I needed. This was not just about respect. This was about keeping me away from whatever setup meant. I ended the call politely, then walked to the kitchen, laid out Poppy's birth certificate, my passport, and her school records in a neat stack. I plugged my phone into the charger so it would not die mid-call. I wrote down the time of Dad's voicemail and the exact words he used. Then I cracked Poppy's bedroom door open and looked at her sleeping with her rabbit tucked under her chin. That was when the whole thing became very simple. I was not protecting pride. I was protecting her right to live without being punished for asking. When the clock on the microwave turned, I picked up my phone and dialed Gavin's number. He answered after a couple of rings with a calm voice. I introduced myself and told him I was Ruth's granddaughter. Then I said the sentence great-grandma had prepared me for. My parents punished my daughter for asking about the thing that was supposed to keep us safe. There was a pause on his end, but it did not sound surprised. It sounded confirmed. He asked first if we were safe right now. I said yes. Then he told me not to sign anything, not to attend any family meetings, and not to respond to threats. He said he could not explain everything over the phone, but he could confirm that he was involved with the arrangements great-grandma made for my child. He told me to come see him on the first business day with my identification and Poppy's birth certificate. Then he said one sentence that made my whole body go still. They do not get to discipline a beneficiary into silence. When I hung up with Gavin, the house was still quiet, but it no longer felt empty. It felt protected. That was the strangest part. Nothing outside had changed yet. My parents were still in their bright house across town, still convinced they were in charge, still waiting for me to show up at 10 in the morning and let them assign consequences to my life. But the shape of things had already shifted. Great-grandma had planned for this. She had seen something coming long before I did. About 2 hours later, my phone started blowing up. Mom left the first voicemail, and her voice was all panic with no polish left on it. She demanded to know why the trustee was refusing to speak to them. Dad's message came right after, shorter and sharper. He asked what I had done. I did not answer either one. I just saved them. The first business day after Christmas, I dropped Poppy off at her winter break program like everything was normal. Backpack, hair brushed, quick love you at the curb. Then I drove downtown through gray Pittsburgh slush and parked near a low office building with frosted glass doors. Gavin met me in the lobby. He wore a simple button-down and a winter coat that looked like it had survived 100 tax seasons. He did not pity me. He shook my hand and told me he was going to get me informed. In his office, a file folder sat on the desk with a label that made my stomach lurch. Poppy's Trust. Gavin opened it and slid papers toward me. He told me great-grandma had established a trust for Poppy as a minor beneficiary. He tapped the page and said the trustee was a professional fiduciary institution. Not my parents. Not Celeste. Not any family member. I asked if my father had been lying when he acted like he was handling everything. Gavin gave a small, dry smile and said my father had only been handling my father. Then he pulled out a simple chart. Beneficiary, Poppy died. Legal parent, me. Trustee, a professional firm. No Dad. No Mom. No Celeste. I sat back in the chair and felt something lock into place. Then Gavin said the sentence that explained Christmas dinner. Poppy had asked about the one thing they could not control. Gavin did not make me wait for the ugly part. He took a thinner packet from the file and laid it on top like he wanted it separate from everything else. He said this was why Great-Grandma told me to call. The first page was an email chain. I recognized Dad's name in the sender line. I recognized Celeste's too, and the messages were not emotional. That was what made them worse. They were strategic. Dad had written to the trustee, asking what steps would be required to ensure stable management for a minor beneficiary. Celeste had followed with a cheerful note offering herself as financial guardian because she was close to the child. I stared at the page and said she barely knew Poppy. Gavin nodded and said they had been preparing to petition for appointment as guardian of the property, not custody. Money control. Then he slid forward one more sheet, a draft petition dated before Christmas. They were already moving. That was when the whole dinner table scene changed shape in my mind. Poppy did not embarrass them. She threatened them. Her question came too close to something they had been trying to keep quiet. Gavin moved fast, but he never took the wheel out of my hands. He asked if I wanted him to notify the trustee formally that I was Poppy's legal parent and that any contact from relatives should be treated as interference. I said, yes, immediately. He typed while I watched. He attached copies of my identification and Poppy's birth certificate. He described my parents' attempt to punish her for asking about the trust in language so calm. It felt sharp. Then he printed the letter and told me to read every line before signing. I did. It was plain and almost boring, which made it powerful. No drama, just reality. I signed where he indicated, and Gavin scanned it, sent it, then called the trustee main line on speaker. A woman answered in the practiced voice of someone who says difficult things all day without changing tone. Gavin introduced himself and said they were placing an immediate restriction on information sharing and distribution discussions to verified parties only. She said understood and told him she was flagging the account. When the call ended, he looked at me and said they would not be able to charm their way into details anymore. I walked out of that office with a folder in my hands and the feeling that a door had just slammed shut on them. The next few days came in waves. Missed calls, messages, Mom crying in one voicemail and furious in the next. Dad demanding that I fix it. Celeste sending one text asking if I was really doing this to family. I answered none of them. I forwarded everything into the evidence folders Gavin told me to keep. Then, on the fourth day, a man in a heavy coat knocked on my door while I was packing Poppy's lunch. He handed me a stapled packet, waited for my signature, and left. Poppy asked who it was. I told her it was paper, because that was the truth. In the packet, Celeste's name appeared on the first page in bold type above the words, emergency petition. The language was almost laughable in how familiar it was. Unstable. Erratic. Unfit. They wanted the court to appoint Celeste in the name of stability. They mentioned trust distributions like that was the natural next step. My hands did not shake. I just sat down and started a response list. When Mom left another voicemail saying Poppy would lose her family if I kept this up, the last bit of doubt in me disappeared. They were not trying to correct me anymore. They were trying to erase me. Court smelled like wet coats and old paper. Celeste arrived in a beige sweater, with her hair smoothed flat, dressed to look harmless. Dad walked beside her like he was escorting his chosen speaker. Mom dabbed dry eyes with a tissue she clearly meant to use as part of the performance. I carried my folder and a small binder Gavin had helped me organize with tabs. Christmas. Funeral. Voicemails. Texts. Timeline. Gavin sat a few rows behind me, not speaking for me, just there. The judge looked over her glasses and said, emergency petitions require emergency facts. Celeste began with concern for Poppy, but the judge cut her off and asked why she was seeking access to trust funds If this was truly about safety, then it was my turn. I handed over Dad's messages. Grounded. Family meeting. Not welcome. I explained calmly that my child had been punished for asking about something great. Grandma promised for safety, and that my family had been preparing to pursue control of her property without informing me. The judge's eyes moved across the pages. Then she asked Celeste why she should be appointed over a professional trustee. Celeste blinked. Dad got angry and said I was making it difficult. The judge looked straight at him and said the court was not a tool for family control. 10 minutes later, the emergency request was denied. Losing in court did not make my parents quiet. It only made them change tactics. Within 24 hours, an aunt texted asking why I had been banned from my parents' house. A cousin messaged saying Mom told everyone I was keeping Poppy from the family. My mother was doing what she always did. Tell the story first, and make sure her version got there before the truth. In the family group chat, she posted that I had chosen to separate myself, and that their door was closed until I got help. Dad added that Poppy would always have a place there, even if I did not. That line twisted something in me. My daughter was not a place. She was not a bargaining chip. She was a child. I did not argue in the chat. I made one quiet move instead. Gavin had emailed me a PDF that morning, a clean summary of the trust and the property held under it. I forwarded the cover page into the group chat with one sentence above it. This house is held in trust for Poppy's benefit. Any attempt to ban her legal parent violates the trust conditions. Then, I stopped typing. The group chat went still. Not the ordinary kind of still. The kind where everyone is rereading the message and realizing the story just changed shape. My uncle replied first and asked if I was serious. Another cousin asked whether Mom and Dad were trying to control a house that was not even really theirs. Mom rushed in saying that was not what it meant. But documents do not care about tone. Celeste did not say a word. That silence told me plenty. For years, my family relied on the fact that they spoke first and louder. They counted on embarrassment. They counted on my reluctance to make things public. But the truth has a strange effect when it finally lands in writing. It stops sounding emotional. It starts sounding undeniable. I sat on my couch and watched the chat shift from poor Mom and Dad to wait. What were you trying to do? That was the second front, and they were losing ground there too. The family story they had built, the one where I was difficult and oversensitive and dramatic, had collided with a stamped legal fact. The house they wanted to wield like a symbol of authority was not truly theirs to command. It was part of the thing they had spent months trying to steer toward themselves. And now everyone else could see it too. About a week later, my parents received an official notice by certified mail. I know because Dad called me the minute he opened it. His voice was tight and stripped of its usual certainty. He asked what I had done. I told him the truth. I had made one phone call and told the truth. The notice itself was blunt. Their right to remain in that house was a privilege with conditions, not ownership in the way they had always implied. No retaliation against the beneficiary. No exclusion of the beneficiary's legal parent. No interference with trust protections. If they kept pushing, the trustee could move to terminate their occupancy. After that letter, one phrase disappeared almost overnight. Learn your place. Suddenly, they were no longer telling me to fall in line. Now, they wanted to move forward. As if all of this had been a misunderstanding instead of a plan. Celeste tried once with a text saying we should put everything behind us. I did not answer. There was nothing to put behind us that had not first been dragged into the light by them. And once you know someone was willing to punish a child for asking the wrong question, there is no honest way back to pretending it was only a tense holiday dinner. The emergency petition went nowhere after court. Gavin kept me updated in those measured, unemotional ways professionals do when they know the facts are already strong. The trustee stayed firm. My parents were blocked from information. Their leverage was gone. And because leverage was gone, their performance changed too. Less command. More wounded confusion. Less certainty. More attempts at soft language. That might have worked on me once. It did not work now. The hard part about family control is that it often survives by sounding normal. Once the legal structure around Poppy was clear, so much of their behavior lost its disguise. They were not worried. They were not simply old-fashioned. They were not protecting tradition. They were trying to manage access to something they believed should have flowed through them. When that pathway closed, their anger turned into panic, and their panic turned into politeness. That sequence told me everything I needed to know. Months passed, and little things began to change. The emergency filing died quietly. The trustee remained steady. Some relatives stopped echoing my parents and just went quiet around them instead. Not dramatic cutoffs, just fewer invitations, fewer approving replies, less applause for their version of reality. At home, Poppy changed in ways that mattered more than any court order. She stopped apologizing every time she needed something small. One afternoon, she asked for water and did not add sorry at the end. Another day, she could not find her shoes and called for help without sounding guilty for existing. Those might sound like tiny shifts to someone else. To me, they felt enormous. One evening, while she was drawing on the floor, she asked whether great-grandma had really meant that safety thing. I told her yes. I told her great-grandma knew some adults confuse love with control. And she wanted something in place that did not depend on anyone's mood. Poppy nodded like that made sense to her. Maybe it did. Children understand power long before they understand legal language. Then one day, a letter arrived for her, forwarded through Gavin in a crisp envelope. The handwriting was great, Grandma's. Poppy sounded out the words slowly while I sat beside her on the couch. The line that broke me was simple. You were brave enough to ask, so I kept my promise. Poppy looked up at me and cried, but she did not apologize for crying. That mattered. That mattered more than I can say. It meant the lesson was changing. She was not learning to become smaller so adults could stay comfortable. She was learning that asking is not wrong. That safety is not rude. That love is not something you earn by swallowing your own questions. I sat there with her and understood that this had never really been about money, or a house, or even a trust. Those were tools. What I was protecting was much older and more fragile. Her right to speak and still be loved. Her right to ask and not be punished. Her right to grow up without inheriting the same script I did. Great-grandma had planned for the legal part. My job was to finish the emotional part. And for the first time, I felt like I finally was. If anyone asks what changed after all of that, the answer is not just legal. It is personal. Our new rule is simple. Access to my child does not come through humiliating her mother. It does not come through punishment dressed up as manners. It does not come through threats, shame, or family performances, where one child is expected to shrink so everyone else can stay comfortable. My parents learned that the hard way. They tried to use Christmas like a leash. They tried to use family language like a lock. They tried to make a 7-year-old feel rude for asking about the thing meant to keep her safe. And in the end, all they did was expose what they had been doing for years. They were never protecting tradition. They were protecting control. Once that became clear, everything else got simpler. I stopped negotiating. I stopped explaining. I stopped trying to win fairness from people who had already decided fairness belonged to someone else. Poppy feels the difference now. She asks questions without checking my face first. She does not say sorry every time she needs help. She still remembers that dinner. I know she does. But it no longer lives in her like a warning. It lives there like a lesson. Ask anyway. Speak anyway. You are not bad for wanting to understand what keeps you safe. As for my parents, they still live in that house under conditions they did not write. They still have to live with the fact that the little girl they tried to silence turned out to be the one person in the room who asked the right question. Celeste can say whatever she wants about family. Dad can still bark. Mom can still smile like poison and call it love. None of it changes what is written down now. Not in the trust, not in the court record, not in my daughter. Great-grandma was right about one thing more than anything else. Safety does not work if other people get to control it. So that is where this ends. Not with me winning a fight at Christmas dinner. With my daughter growing up in a house where asking is allowed, where silence is not the price of belonging, and where love does not depend on learning your place.